Hello, my name is Kara Johnson, and I would like to welcome you to the 13th Annual Community Lecture Series hosted by the Prince William Sound Science Center. This is a lecture series that we have that goes from September through April, and we try to bring interesting guest speakers and local speakers and researchers to you to help share the science that we are involved with or associated with at the Science Center. So I am thrilled to introduce our first speaker of the season, Darren Roberts. He recently has been in Antarctica studying Weddell seals. He spent 1 year there previously, and he's going back this season. And he is also fortunate enough to have the opportunity to spend a second field season studying penguins this upcoming year as well. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to send around our sign-in sheet, so please sign in so we can keep track of how many people we're actually able to help bring science to. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So I'll introduce myself a little bit, and I just moved to town, so I'll be around, but working field seasons. I'm a seasonal field technician, so the radio said I was a professor. That's not true. I'm just a field tech that works on the project, but the two primary investigators, Robert Garrett and Jay Rotella, were nice enough to let me speak on behalf of the project. So I'm not an expert in Weddell seals. I've just worked with them as a field technician, but I'll kind of share what I know about them, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. Definitely wanted to thank Kara and the Science Center for having me also and getting to kick off the first of the lecture series. And I also wanted to thank the NSF for the funding. And everything goes through Montana State, but this is an NSF-funded project, so is everything in Antarctica on the United States side. And everything done with Weddell seals was collected under research permits from NOAA. Those are the little business things I have to say. So today, we'll talk a little bit about pinniped biology, just get people all on the same page. I wasn't sure exactly what the experience level of different people can be with biology, so I'll talk a little bit about pinniped biology. We'll talk about Weddell seal biology and life history. What we study mostly is breeding in regards to environmental factors, and we're going to go over some of the techniques that we use to answer the questions. That's more of what I do, actually, is just implement the actual research on the ground. An interesting thing happened not too long ago, and that was the B-15A iceberg, and we'll definitely talk about that. That had a big effect on part of the Weddell seal population. And we'll also talk a little bit about the white island population, and I'll get to all that stuff later and go into more depth. So, a little bit about pinnipeds. Pinnipeds are basically everything that's seal or seal-like. So, otariids are the eared seals, so fur seals and sea lions. A lot of those around here. Otobenids, walruses, they're kind of in their own little group. And then phocids, which is what Weddell seals are the true seals, are the earless seals. And they make up the majority of the seal individuals on the planet for sure. They're definitely the biggest group, but Weddell seals are phocids. Pinnipeds compose over 20% of the diversity of marine mammals. There's 34 to 36 species roughly, and to emphasize, nearly 90% of the population of pinnipeds are phocids or true seals. And it's a rough estimation, but there's roughly 50 million seals and fur seals on the planet. So there's two main hypotheses that are kind of currently being debated when it comes to the evolution of pinnipeds, and I thought it was kind of interesting. The monophyletic hypothesis says that the three pinniped families share a single common evolutionary ancestor. And then the diphyletic, which I find interesting, has two of the three groups, the otobenids and the otariids, so the fur seals and the walruses, having a more recent common ancestor with bears, and phocids, like Weddell seals, having a more recent common ancestor with mustelids, so things like weasels and skunks. And with a lot of research from actually University of Alaska and other groups, we're getting much more information on this from genetics. And also, if anybody has questions as we go, there'll be questions at the end, but feel free to ask. I'm completely fine with that. I can stop, no problem. So the project that I work on is Weddell seal population dynamics in Erebus Bay, and funded by the NSF in Montana State. It's a really interesting population because the Erebus Bay population is a population of mammals that's been studied for over 40 years, which it's not the longest. I think it's the second longest study ever done on a long-lived mammal, so marine and terrestrial. And the main thrust of what we're trying to find out is how temporal variation in the marine environment, so climate, changes in marine conditions, and sea ice affect a long-lived mammal's population dynamics. We're also evaluating data on body mass dynamics, so finding out what getting fat actually means to a seal and how important it is or isn't. We're based out of McMurdo Station, Antarctica, which is south of New Zealand. I did want to mention the interesting thing about the Weddell seal population is that a lot of projects study animals that are in trouble, or if they're not in trouble, they're at least heavily affected by humans in some way. And the Weddell seal population is really interesting in that it's a healthy population. It's what you'd want to see. So for us, it's somewhat looking, I like the analogy of, it's like a doctor getting to study a healthy patient instead of always looking at somebody that's sick, which is what a lot of biology unfortunately has to deal with just because of the influence of not just humans, other things too. This population gives us an opportunity to look at how a population that's doing well does over time, and we have a long data set to back it up. This is just to show kind of where things are. So McMurdo, where this is based out of, is right there south of New Zealand. The U.S. also has stations at Palmer Station, south of Argentina and Chile, and South Pole, which is Amundsen Scott. This is Ross Island, which is where McMurdo is located. And so we're studying this really small snapshot. It's actually a pretty big study area. It covers about 60 miles as far as what we actually have to cover looking for animals. But Weddell seals are found all over the entire Antarctic, so we're only able to study this little tiny snapshot because of obvious problems with just dealing with the area. And so we're doing our best to extrapolate from that, but this is just a small portion of the population. McMurdo Station is actually there on the peninsula out on the point. And then we actually work out of a field camp just south of the ice tongue, about right there. This is Mount Erebus, a glacier, and a big ice tongue that comes out. There's colonies all along the sea ice crack here. There's colonies at an inaccessible island, Big Razorback, Little Razorback, and then there's colonies out to Cape Evans and into Turk's Head. And there's also seals at the base of the tongue. So we spend a lot of time going from place to place trying to find them. They associate with sea ice cracks. Everybody else that works on the ice tries to avoid those because that's where you get into trouble, but that's where the seals are, so that's where we have to go all the time. I just thought people might be interested in what the town actually looks like. It's a lot like a mining town. Just all they do is science. That's fuel, housing, meal, place to eat. So that's town though. It's this little section, and then it wraps around a bay, and then this is the point. And this is actually interesting that there's this modern American station right there, and this is Scott's Hut. So we're right next to Scott's Hut, just using the same. Basically, it was a good place to build, so we built there also. This is actually, so they're late spring. Usually this is all frozen in when I'm there, or not usually, this is all frozen in when I'm there. So this is actually be late into their summer probably to get this kind of ice blowout for sure. And then the pier is interesting that that's actually ice that's maintained from when the sea ice is in. There's not a good cut for ships to get in, so they have to maintain a sea ice pier to offload everything when they finally get the ice blowout that they can get the ship in. So yeah, it's kind of funny in the middle of our end of winter, getting into the spring a little bit, you'll see the guys all working trying to keep the ice pure. I mean, they just work trying to keep the ice on it for 12 hours a day or whatever. They're constantly working on it, but that's what they have to do.
Is that floating ice?
Yep.
So how do they maintain it?
It's got pilings that are frozen into it, and then it's tied to shore. It's I've never seen anything like it. It's an interesting way to do it. And they only bring supplies into McMurdo. It's so far south. It's at 77 South. So for people, typically they fly them in, and there's a sea ice runway, so you can land on the sea ice. But then late in the summer when it gets like this, people can come in on ships. But usually the ships are just used to resupply the station.
So do people live there year round?
Yeah.
I mean, like one person stays there all year round. Not necessarily like people are there for a while and then leave and other people replace them.
Do you mean like are there people that live there?
Like caretakers?
Yeah. I mean, there's people that kind of serve that role. They usually cycle people in 6-month seasons, but I know people that have worked more than a year straight, for sure. It just kind of depends on what your job is. For us, we have a 2.5-month season because we're just there. Breeding season, they pup, and then we start losing sea ice. So as soon as we start losing the ability to get near the animals and the animals wean, we're done. So yeah, we'll get there October 1st, and we'll be done by December 15th. The sea ice by December will be dangerous. I think it's the right word. At least to work on. So a little bit about Weddell seals. They're the most southerly distributed of any mammal, with a habitat that extends as far south as McMurdo Sound. And specifically, the White Island population is the farthest south of any mammal on the planet, and it's at 77 south. It's an apex predator associated with fast ice, and I chose a bad graphic to demonstrate this, but because this is an iceberg, this isn't land. But fast ice is just ice that's fast to land. So the ice that's connected to land, they're associated with basically the tidal cracks, and you can't see tidal cracks. So they are associated with tidal cracks that are attached to fast ice, apparently. Or yeah, fast ice. They're pretty big. Adults are between 8 and 1,200 pounds, but they've been up to 14. They've definitely had them recorded up to 1,400 pounds, about 12 feet long, but definitely big as adults. And as far as seals go, they're darn near the best there is at diving. Only elephant seals are better divers. Yeah, can dive. They routinely dive over 500 meters, but can dive in excess of 700 meters. And typical dive duration is 20 to 30 minutes, but we have direct evidence of dives lasting 80 minutes, so they're phenomenal divers. Exploit tidal cracks. So to go in a little bit more detail about why they exploit those tidal cracks is they have this amazing ability to dive and stay under for a long time. So at the sea ice edge, where all the predators kind of hang out, they can get under the ice and they go in as far as they can to land where they find the cracks that they can maintain for breathing holes. And basically it allows them to, if they want to pup, to have a place that's completely devoid of predators. There's no animal that can get back as far as they are into the sea ice. So, and it's kind of interesting for us studying them because they didn't evolve with any land predators. So they're completely unaware of the idea even of something attacking them on land. And so they're very easy to work with as far as being able to walk up to them. I wouldn't want to mess with them in the water, but so yeah, they raise their young, and then as the sea ice melts out while they're raising their young, and so both of them can go out to open ocean when the pups wean and they need a feed. Evolved with no land predators. I'll show you some video in a minute, but they're very, they give this impression that they're really almost kind of shy, and that you can walk right up to them. They're not bad. They're not scared of people. They don't run too much from you. But that being said, they're an impressive apex predator. If they had an opportunity to get at me in the water, I would hate to see what would happen, I guess is what I would say. They birth in colonies, so another thing that's really great for a biologist is an animal that goes and does its thing and then comes to a colony that you can walk up to and look right at your study animal. And talking to guys that do like terrestrial biology, it's really funny because so if you're trying to track a deer population, you have to go find the deer that you're trying to do every time. We're able to walk into the exact colony that we want to look at and find every single animal and tag and take care of every single animal essentially as far as knowing what's going on in the life history. So it's a really unique animal for that reason, and it's really, really useful for us. And they are capable of delaying implantation, which is really, really neat, and I'll go into it more later. But so they can mate and then delay implantation of the embryo for over 6 months. It's really, really impressive. Let's see if this will play. So this is just, I was talking about the breeding. Oh, no. Hold on. I think I'm going to have to push the button. I think you just have to push it like in the middle of the screen. This is just, so They're kind of interesting. They have 2 canine teeth on the top, like most dogs or whatever you see just have, or 2 sets, so 4 teeth total. Most dogs obviously just have the 2, but they maintain their breathing holes just by scraping at the ice with their teeth. A little bit of footage, but yeah, so it's kind of neat. That's especially kind of more in the winter, they'll do a lot of maintaining the breathing hole, and there's an idea, I'm not sure exactly how supported it is. I think there's some truth to it that at least some percent of the population, you don't see a lot of like senescence in the animals as they get older, so they reach this line that they don't typically live older than 30 years old, but as animals reach kind of that age, we don't see this huge decline in body condition necessarily. And so, until right at the end. And so there's a suggestion and a possibility that as they maintain their holes over the course of their life, they wear down their teeth, and eventually they reach a point where they just starve to death, so it's this huge drop-off right at the end. But they don't seem to be living to the extent of what they possibly could live if they maintained better dentition throughout their life. But that's the reason why. That's not fully substantiated with evidence. That's just kind of an idea that people have had. I'm not saying that that's true or not true. Yeah, it does. They have that. Definitely, a lot of people think that about them. It helps to work with cute animals, I guess. What else? Seal more. They do have predators once they're, especially out on the pack ice. Which pack ice is, there's fast ice attached to land, sea ice, which is all the ice packed in, and then pack ice is the actual floating smaller chunks, not the big sheets like sea ice is. And so they do, because they're all the way around the continent. They're found everywhere, so they're found mostly on fast ice to breed, but they do go out and forage in the open ocean, so they'll end up on pack ice and stuff. And yeah, they'll get eaten, not usually adults by leopard seals, but not ever adults by leopard seals. Definitely pups that are out near the pack will definitely get hit by leopard seals. Killer whales will take adults and juvies. They eat fish, krill, squid, and sometimes penguins. That's stuff that we know so far. There's still a lot of research kind of being done on exactly what they eat, and especially mossini. So there's some evidence they eat mossini, which is the Antarctic bonefish, or it's basically the top fish predator in the ecosystem. And the evidence is that you'll find a Weddell seal hole with a mossini head ripped off and just floating there. So we think that, I've heard people say that they've seen them playing with them too, but there's no direct evidence yet. But we think that they're probably ripping the heads off, eating the body, and then leaving the head. So if they're eating mossini, though, that would tell us a lot that'll go along with that iceberg I was talking about earlier, and we'll go into that a little bit more. The population's huge. It's doing really well. Rough estimates are between 800,000 and 1 million individuals just in the Weddell seal population. There's other seals in Antarctica that are doing better as size-wise. Crab-eater seals probably have a bigger population than Weddell seals do, but that 800 to 1 million is a rough estimation. Like I said, we have to extrapolate sometimes, and it's difficult. But I'm excited about, there's some new technology, satellite technology, that we were doing some ground truthing for them as far as seeing if they could count Weddell seals from satellite images, and that would be hugely useful because you could cover the whole continent. The girl that is looking at it, you guys might have seen it in the news, there was a National Geographic article about the emperor penguin population estimate doubled based on her research. Yeah. So, and I like where she's going with it, and I still have a job because we still have to ground truth her, so it works for me. We use mark recapture, so we use a pretty kind of old and fast way to just keep track of a population, especially when they all come to the same place. It's pretty easy. We do flipper tags, which are, there's nothing fancy. They're actually a livestock tag that people use on sheep. And we just put it in the flipper webbing.
Why not like pit tags?
For Weddell seals, I've used pit tags on other animals. For Weddell seals, it's not worth the money. There's so many of them that, I mean, in our budget, even like the tags that we use are $2 a piece. So we put 2 tags on each animal, but we tagged 800 last year, so that starts adding up. That's just 2 plastic tags. And like pit tags are $5 to $8, I think. I'm not sure exactly how much they run, but it starts getting really, really expensive to pit tag everybody, and we don't need it. we have because they're not endangered, we have the ability to handle them as much as we need to. So if we need to retag them, we retag them. And we know a really good amount about every single animal that's in our study area, and we haven't run into the necessity for pit tags, essentially. So we don't use them. Temp tags, we do retag adults, like I was just saying. We're able to do that. And we'll tag pups when they're 2 days old. Last year we tagged 829 animals total. 212 were adults, 124 females, and 88 males. And then we tagged 617 pups in 2.5 months. Yeah, and they all pup at the same time, so it's like you go from it's really quiet and then just 12 or 14 hours a day of just tagging pups over and over, and then that stops after about a month, but it's like a month straight of just tagging pups. So it's interesting. And then after that, you get into the recapture. So once you've tagged everybody that's born, you can start doing surveys to re-site tags, and that's...
What's the typical pupping month?
They'll usually go... they'll start going kind of the end of October. We'll start seeing some early October. Yeah, and then by the end of October, it kind of starts ramping up pretty good. And beginning of November is just busy. So mark recapture, marking, and recapturing doesn't mean actually recapturing, just respotting tags. And so we actually have computers that we just enter tag numbers in, and data entry is really nice and easy. That we enter everything in field computers, so we don't have the multiple steps of writing on paper. So this is a guy named Mike that's going to be restraining. And the guy tagging is named Jesse. And I'm filming. So this seal really goes along well. I mean, he runs a little bit at the beginning, but it's a pretty good seal.
Yeah, Mike. You got it, you got it.
We usually just try to get the reins up underneath their flippers. And this animal calmed down really well as soon as they got the bag on its head. That doesn't always happen, but that's pretty typical. That's one of the reasons that we can do it with just 2 people. And that's just in the flipper webbing. It's not super sensitive. That's an old tag, so this animal's getting new tags.
Why?
The old ones were looking nasty, and we didn't want to lose track of the seal. And then this is just a genetic sample that he's getting, his little tissue sample. And it's as simple as that, pretty much. But that seal was really, really good. Went along with it pretty good.
Jesse, Mike the man.
I'm positive. So this is another tagging video with a seal. So kind of a big part of my actual job is just handling large animals, and more than, I mean, people safety's first, but in this case, animal safety. And so there's, where the animal that we want to tag is over by a bunch of ice, which is the mom. And so we'll actually use the pups a lot of times to lure the mom kind of into a safer area to tag it, because she'll follow the pup wherever the pup goes. And so she gets away from the ice. There's like jagged ice that we didn't want her to hit her head on. Once she got away from that, though, she was right next, the pup was right in front of her, so I didn't want to bag her and have her go over the pup and crush the pup. So a lot of that's just more my job, like just trying to figure out how to get the tags in safely. And this is more typical about actually having to do a little bit of problem solving to get the seal to go where you need it to go. And this one's just kind of funny. So the seal went back to the ice that we didn't want it to be tagged on. But we'll get it. Yeah, it's a little mad, I think. I just still wanted to go back that direction. And you can kind of pull them where you want to go. Like, you can steer them a little bit once you get the bag on. Yeah.
Is this the first time this has been done?
No, it's been done for 40 years.
40 years.
40.
40 years?
Yep. This is, I know, actually I should have mentioned that. So handling seals, it actually looks a lot more aggressive than it, this is definitely standard operating procedure as far as like safely handling seals. Our group's never had a fatality in the 40 years that I am aware of. I don't, other people have had fatalities, but we never have. Yeah, we've had technicians broken for sure. Oh yeah, oh absolutely, yeah. For food, they'd be perfect, but yeah, I mean, yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, really? Huh? So this is just getting the tag in. That seal was worked from the beginning to the end. And of course it has the freaking reins around its body, so you got it. Oh, it's kind of funny. So yeah, they don't always go as easy as the first one. That's more typical. Like, you have to work with them some, but it's pretty, that is kind of the safe operating procedure for handling this species of seal at least.
Is that typical weather?
Kinda. Not, it's, usually the weather's okay, except for when it gets bad, it just gets really, really, really bad. So, what's that? Yeah. So at least the time that I'm there, a lot of times it is like nice and sunny. The beginning of the season, it's a lot cooler. We had like lowest temperature we got was like -100 with wind chill that we were working in. Like it was like -60 ambient. And we'll work in that. We won't work in anything much colder than that. It's just too much, really. I mean, we'll call weather days if it gets worse than that. But by the end of the season, it's pretty, you know, it's up around between 0 and 15 degrees, so it's pretty nice by the end of the season. And I'll show you one quick one of us tagging pups. So this pup is actually, usually we tag it 2 days old. This pup's more like probably 20 days old or 15 days old. And so it's a lot more work. And the only reason I included this video is just to show you that with pups, it doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. So you got one tag in, but the seal just takes off. And at that age, they're actually it's hard to tag them with just one person. We tried it. And then if it comes to that point, we'll just go ahead and restrain them, which with young seals, you can just grab them.
How come you're not bagging?
That's a baby seal, essentially. So the bag is actually too much. It's too big. And this is how we handle other Hawaiian monk seals or another seal that I work with, and this is typically how you handle those animals. If you just hold their head still.
They just cover the eye.
I don't know. I don't like putting my hands over the eyes. I don't want to.
No, I mean like use like a cloth or something to cover the eyes.
I've seen people do that on really long taggings, like if they're putting on instrumentation. I've seen people do something like that.
Most of the stuff I've seen with monk seals in Hawaii is like people removing nets and stuff from them. And
Okay.
they'll cover their eyes and like cut all the netting off and stuff.
I've never. When I take a net off a monk seal, I just cut it off. I don't do that, but some people might. That's not been my experience, but I'm sure that program's been going for years and years and years. I'm sure people have done it a bunch of different ways. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting story that came out of. So to go into our project a little bit more, we've been monitoring all this stuff, and the number one question that everybody always asks is, or seems to be, is, well, is climate change affecting Weddell seals? And the answer is there's no smoking evidence that that's the case. The population's really robust. And we have not seen anything that necessarily says that climate change is negatively affecting monk seals. Or Weddell seals. What species am I talking about even anymore? But this is interesting because it's like a little microcosm of something that happened. And that was the B-15 iceberg, or B-15 was a larger iceberg. It calved from the McMurdo ice shelf and came off and broke into pieces. But B-15A is the iceberg that is the most important to us, and it's huge. It's a 1,200 square mile iceberg. And so typically when you go into McMurdo Sound, there's all the sea ice in the wintertime, and all this gets blown out back to Ross Island. So McMurdo is down here on the other side. So those photos where all the ice was blown out, essentially this iceberg came in and trapped all the sea ice in. And so when you usually have ice blowout and then refreeze, they didn't have that. It was all trapped. And it also changed, basically, we think it changed the food web in McMurdo Sound. And we did actually see that seals pupped less in iceberg years. And here's kind of data from that, and I'll go through it real quick. So this is females in our colony, and you kind of see things going along stags. This is total breeding females. Skip means females that are skipping a year. That a lot of times seals do pup annually, but occasionally they skip years. And then so pre-breeders, animals that aren't sexually mature yet, or females that aren't sexually mature. And everything's kind of going along, and then you see the iceberg years start, and it's interesting. You see a big increase in the number of females in the area, but you see a big decrease in the amount of animals that are actually breeding at the peak of the ice, at the period where the iceberg was blocking the ice into McMurdo Sound. And so this goes into something that's really interesting that we see with mammals, at least. I'm not sure about with other groups, but where breeding age animals will buffer against changes. And so at this point, you see the females essentially all take a year off when they see that I don't know, I can't speak at all to if it's decision or if it's just something that their body does, but there's a decrease in maybe not the abundance of food, but maybe the availability of food. There may have been just as much food trapped behind the iceberg, but it may have been at different places because it changed currents, it changed wind direction, not wind direction, but it changed the way that wind affected the sound, it changed everything. So the interesting, at least, is that in the data that is represented.
These colonies are all McMurdo area,
yeah, these are all in that McMurdo Sound area, yeah.
There's some evidence that the opposite might happen on the peninsula, that single season sea ice in some of the bays and things is actually staying longer because of increased snowfall and more fresh
Sure,
water.
yep.
And I wonder, whether that would show a similar effect.
I'm interested in that too. I know that the snowfall thing is really interesting, that annual snowfall last year at least was way higher than usual, and that's something that I've heard people attribute to. Yep. So I don't know specifically, but no. And so you have more breeders skipping years, and then eventually less seals coming back, and then they kind of figure out that everything's gone and everything rebounds back to kind of where it was. So the seals are there, take a year off, and then leave. There's just less females there. Iceberg ends, animals come back, breeding come back, and everything else stays kind of somewhat the same, at least. And so annual survival and probability of breeding. So this actually I think is amazing. Compared to other people who've worked with other large mammals, this adult survival up around 80% is phenomenal. They do really, really well once they're adults, for sure.
How long does survival last? You said that they kind of die around 30 years old?
Yeah, between 27 and 30 is usually when you see them kind of take the dive. And so with the iceberg, this is just reinforcing what I had said earlier, that when the iceberg was in, the probability of reproduction dropped with basically time as the iceberg was there. So as conditions got I don't want to say worse, not necessarily worse, but as conditions changed in McMurdo Sound, the seal population responded in their breeding efforts.
Do you notice a great deal of mortality due to
I've seen, it's really hard to know. Definitely, you'll find seals that are like crushed in ice, but it's hard to know if there's no way to know if it was before they died or after that they just died and then got crushed in ice. That's definitely possible. So I don't have any information on that. I think there are people, definitely Dan Costa at the University of California, Santa Cruz has tags that are more specific on giving location of animals and would know more about physiology. And there's a woman at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks too, I believe, that her research might be more kind of specific to that, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but so I don't know. So that's kind of what's been going on. The other tag that we put on, and this is really cool, that it came up that with Weddell seals, we're weighing all these pups, and there's some seals that are the pups that don't ever seem to go in the water, and they're huge. They're just these huge fat seals, but you never see them get in the water. They're just always hanging out. And a lot of the other pups will be getting in the water with mom, swimming around, because they don't really know how to swim so good at first, so they get in and swim with mom some, and they might not be as big, but they're definitely in the water more often. And so we wanted to test that and find out about that hypothesis. So what we did was take a temperature tag, which is, we actually just glue a tiny little thermometer, temperature sensor, to the tags that we use, the regular tags. And that gives basically just time and temperature data, so how long they're in the water. And it's not even how long they're in the water. It works really well because the water is a constant temperature. And so the data just looks like, and I emailed the guy and I didn't get the data back in time to put it in the presentation, but the data is really obvious when they're out of the water. There's big fluctuations in temperature, which you'd expect to see, and then they get in the water and it goes directly to -2 and it stays there and it's flatline, and so that's pretty obvious that they're in the water. But it poses a question that goes against, so kind of with seals at least, the common kind of accepted knowledge is that the bigger the seal is when it weans from its mother, the better off it is survivability wise. And typically in most populations, at least with seals I've worked with monk seals, that holds true, and I mean that holds very true. But we started wondering, well, these animals are never even going into the water, they're not getting taught how to go, and yeah, they might be gigantic, but are seals that are spending more time in the water who may weigh less, are they actually more fit animals when it comes to survivability 3 years down the road or whatever? So this is a pilot project. We started it last year, and that's kind of where it's going. And yeah, we don't know exactly what the case is. We weigh pups also, so we weigh them at birth, 20 days and 35 days, and they usually wean right around 35 days. So totals, we had 144 births that we tagged, that's with the temperature tag. At 20 days, we resighted and retagged, or we resighted at least and reweighed 134 of them. And at 35 days, we were able to reweigh 128. And so even that says something about how good survivability is in the pups from, and so I'm comfortable that we were able to find them. And so you're probably losing the majority of the ones that you lose between weighings, that they probably died. Some of them may not have. We might have just missed them, but that's pretty unlikely. But even then, if we started with 144 and ended after weaning with 128, that is really good. When they're born, they weigh between 50 and 80 pounds, and then within 35 days, they'll be, we had seals that were over 300 pounds. So they have some of the fattiest milk of any mammal, and I think it's like 45 to 48% fat. It's really pretty good stuff for putting on weight. I'll show you one. Oh, sorry, last video, I think. So this is just weighing the pups. We just put them in a duffel bag and then weigh it. She's going to tag the pup real quick first. So this is kind of distracting the mom, just make sure the mom's paying attention to me and not to Jess as the girl tagging the seal. And the blood on her chest is just from where she gave birth. It's not like a wound or anything like that.
Is that a brand new?
Yeah, that's 2 days old. And so that one, since we're weighing it, we'll get 3 tags. It gets the temperature tag also.
Is that where she gave birth, behind her, where that red spot is?
Yep.
She didn't use very far.
Nope. It's only been a day. How far? Sorry for the loud. So yeah, we just put them in a duffel bag, pretty much.
You won't see a mama bear be that calm.
No. See, and this is, I mean, they're a really good study animal if you want to work with, I mean, large mammals typically are much harder to deal with.
This probably happened to her too, right?
Yep.
She got weighed when she was a pup.
I don't know if she got weighed. She at least got tagged, though, when she was a pup. She might have gotten weighed.
How old is that mom, you think?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the data. All the pups that we weigh are from known age moms, though, so we know the age of. We actually know the age of the majority of the population in that area, but we only weigh animals from known age moms.
Do you name any of them?
What?
Do you name any of them?
No, they have a tag number. So that's weighing pups. Yeah, it's. What?
Do you talk to them when you're working with them? And does it work?
No. I mean, I don't know. I don't really talk to them. I don't. I talk to the people that I work with, but I don't. It's hard to. Sorry. That.
It's not like talking to a pet.
Yeah. It's. I mean, especially with when we're busy, it's usually just pup to pup. So you're just. It's nonstop. It's not really like, oh, look at the cuties. I sometimes, but not usually.
What would you say?
Yeah. What would I say? I'm sorry, I'm gonna poke a hole in you. But that actually is worth speaking about. We are poking holes in them and stuff and taking tissue samples, but when you see the actual level of kind of what their environment does to them is far, far worse than what we do to them. I mean, just walking around, just moving on the sea ice, a lot of times they'll have big cuts, and the males fight for basically air openings, and so they bite at each other's penile opening. I mean, so what we're doing is pretty minimal compared to what they're actually having to deal with from other seals. And yeah, and we are sensitive to that. Like we do pay attention to make sure that we don't see signs of infection or anything like that from anything that we put into the animal. And if we were to hurt an animal, it definitely gets reported and it's noted that happened.
With all that fat, do they have a layer of skin that's more sensory?
Not that I know of, but I don't know much about the physiology side of it, so I don't know if I could really speak to that accurately. I don't know.
Do males get facial scars like the crab eaters do?
Not like crab eaters, but
Tougher with each other.
they do. But with Weddell seals, all the scarring it's all kind of midsection down, and it's usually on the ventral. They really go for that. They go for the penis pretty hard. It's brutal. I mean, that's where all the scarring is. And I mean, yeah, looking for females, I guess. So, I was going to talk a little bit about White Island, because White Island's really interesting. It's really neat. It's right next to McMurdo. It's 30 kilometers away, so all this stuff is happening within 30 kilometers of where our study population is, and we actually include White Island in our study population because of its importance. Our study's been going on since '68, and when our study started, the White Island population had already been cut off. So there's an iceberg or an ice flow. I'm not exactly sure what caused it, and so I actually don't know exactly how long they've been isolated, but at least since 1968.
Are they genetically extinct?
Yeah, I'll get there, totally. So they're of interest because they were cut off, and when they were cut off in '69, there's only 9 seals in the population at White Island. By 1993, it increased to 26, and I don't know exactly what it was last year. I can't remember. I haven't seen the data yet. But there was a decline in overall body condition. But what's really interesting is that this study area at McMurdo, 30 kilometers away, compared to those seals, we actually see increased adult survivability in the seals that are at White Island, but lower fecundity, so they're having less pups, and higher pup mortality, so they're not gaining as fast as far as building a population, but the adults are surviving longer. And part of this might go back to what I was talking about earlier about that buffering capacity, that you wait to have pups until you have a time where you know you're going to have resources. And I say no, not meaning consciously no, just the species in general, broad term. So you might, those results might be a result of seals at White Island basically just delaying giving birth. So even though they're losing body condition, they're still able to survive because they're not devoting a huge amount of resources to pupping. Another thing about White Island, though, they're genetically different, and there is slightly. It's hard to say and know for sure, but there seems to be. There's one paper that I've seen on it that says that there's an increase of birth defects in that population. But for us, it's really interesting that, at least with mammals, with large mammals, it's not like a normal thing to have an actual geological or geographical isolation event. And so they were isolated geographically, and that's, for us, is great that we have this incredibly complete data set as far as, at least from '68, about an isolated population of mammals. And we also have their general population, which we have something that's valid to compare it to. And so it's a really interesting population for that reason. And the seals at White Island are actually the ones that are the furthest south. White Island is the farthest south of any colony, and so those few seals that are there are actually the farthest south mammals or whatever. Okay, questions?
Well, don't the leopard seals go just far south?
No, leopards, they will when the sea ice goes out. They'll go down they will go down as far south as McMurdo Sound, but it's only when the sea ice is blown out. So they'll come down kind of in the middle of the summer or late summer. And I didn't see any. I have heard of people seeing them late season for sure. I don't know when they kind of start showing up, but I want to see one really bad. Yeah. Yeah, should seal. Yeah, should. Anybody else?
So why seals?
Why what?
Why are you interested in seals? You work with two kinds now.
A little bit of, I'm interested in science and kind of get in where you fit in. I started working with seals, so I really like working with seals, but I like more working on a biology data set that's 40 years long. It's pretty cool. And I don't know, I learned how to tag seals, and so it kind of stuck, but I'm not stuck to seals. I just like science.
Hey, this might be classified information, but is it true that you have a whole shed full of Cadbury chocolate bars in the middle of the shelf?
I don't know. I couldn't verify that. But it wouldn't surprise me, actually. There's some weird stuff out there. It would not surprise me.
Are you going to study seals here, or is that why?
I would love to find a job doing that here. I'm working really hard to find a job here, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to finish the season and then start looking for, there's a project up in the Aleutians that does stuff with stellars that I'm interested in, but it's still not, it'd be really great to work around here, but it depends on where there's funding and stuff. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darren.
Great. I had to say thank you to the various foundations. And if you guys want any more information, here's some websites.
Yeah, and this is Darren's blog, Nature and Noise, and it has beautiful photographs. So you can go to his blog and get a little bit more in depth in the research that they've done, as well as see some incredible photography. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Next Tuesday will be our Audubon series, and we'll have Ann Harding speaking about her adventures on the Alaskan island of Bogoslav. So if you have not signed in, I have a sign-in sheet, and we'll see you next Tuesday.